There's an image that lingers in the mind, a torchbearer running through the night. His light cuts through the dark, his purpose clear. But as he runs, the flame leans closer, the wax melts faster, and before he realizes it, the fire that guided him begins to devour him. That's what hustle can become when it's severed from meaning. Motion, mistaken for life. You might know that feeling. The quiet panic when you stop moving. The sense that if you rest, everything you've built will fall apart. Or worse, you'll have to face the silence that follows. Many men live here, ambitious, productive, respected, and secretly exhausted. They chase growth because slowing down feels like death. Yet somewhere in the chase, purpose turns to punishment. The culture doesn't help. Keep grinding, they say, as if exhaustion were a badge of honor. But beneath that creed often hides avoidance, fear dressed as drive. When Jung spoke of the shadow, he meant the parts of us we exile to survive. And in modern ambition, one of those exiled parts is rest itself. Stillness becomes taboo, as if calm were failure. Imagine the archetype of the warrior without a king. He fights endlessly, loyal to a code he never questioned. His sword never sleeps, but his soul never speaks. Without an inner king, without order, vision, and containment, the warrior becomes his own battlefield. Hustle culture has many warriors like this. Men who fight for purpose, but never pause to ask whose voice they're obeying. Behind that voice, there's often a wound. The father who praised effort but withheld affection. The mentor who taught excellence but never peace. Over time, that becomes a nervous system wired for vigilance. Discipline that's actually fear. Jung would call it identification with the persona, the mask of productivity that wins approval but hides depletion. The body feels it before the mind admits it. Tight chest, restless sleep, a constant edge that caffeine can't fix. We call it drive. But sometimes it's just the ache to be seen, to finally hear, you've done enough. When that validation never comes, the mind learns to self-supply it through output. The result is a cycle. Achieve, collapse, recover, repeat. Purpose inflated by adrenaline until meaning itself becomes a side effect of motion. Dr. Gabor Mate once said that addiction isn't about pleasure, it's about pain. Hustle works the same way. We chase the next goal not for the joy of growth, but to outrun the unease of being. Each victory offers a dopamine spark, a brief reprieve from the void. But soon, the baseline drops, and the only way to feel alive again is to run faster. This isn't weakness, it's conditioning. A nervous system that equates slowing down with danger will sabotage peace every time. So we worship momentum, confuse exhaustion with dedication, and forget that the flame we're guarding was meant to guide, not consume. The promise of this journey is simple: to uncover the mechanism that turns motivation into self-punishment, and to see how that same energy can become clarity instead of chaos. So stay with me. By the midpoint, you'll see a single pattern that explains why burnout repeats itself and how to stop mistaking tension for purpose. Let's begin with the brain itself, where achievement and addiction quietly intertwine. Every chase begins with chemistry. Beneath ambition, beneath every surge of motivation, there's a whisper from the brain: more. Dopamine, the molecule of anticipation, is often mistaken for happiness. It's not pleasure, it's the promise of it. The moment you set a goal, hit a target, refresh a feed, or check off a task, that small burst says, keep going. It rewards motion, not meaning. Neuroscientists call it reward prediction error. When the brain expects a reward and gets it, dopamine spikes. But the spike fades quickly, and the drop leaves a hollow that demands another hit. The achiever learns to live inside that loop. Excitement mistaken for fulfillment. It feels like purpose, but it's just chemical momentum. Jung might say that this is the shadow of progress, an addiction to outer movement compensating for inner stagnation. The achiever archetype builds a life that looks successful but feels like survival. He fears stillness because stillness reveals the emptiness underneath. So he learns to self-soothe with motion. New goals, new projects, new self-improvement rituals. Always optimizing, never arriving. It's not malice. It's the nervous system's way of staying ahead of the void. A childhood without consistent attunement trains the body to seek external confirmation that it still matters. Each achievement says, "You exist." Each pause threatens that fragile proof. So when you slow down, the body interprets it as danger. The heart rate lifts. The mind floods with reasons to get moving again. Modern culture sanctifies this pattern. Silicon Valley calls it innovation. Fitness culture calls it discipline. The Church of Productivity preaches salvation through effort. In truth, it's a monastic order without transcendence. Men praying to progress because they've forgotten how to rest. They don't realize that the altar demands their nervous systems as offerings. Dr. Gabor Mate once observed that the need to achieve can hide a wound of disconnection. The dopamine cycle doesn't start in adulthood. It begins when love felt conditional. The child who earned approval through performance grows into the man who measures worth through productivity. He's praised for his drive, but few notice it's just fear in a tuxedo. Over time, the body adapts to this loop. The self-regulation system, the part that balances stress and rest, gets hijacked. The man loses the capacity to stop. Even joy becomes strategic. Another goal, another benchmark. He can't simply be, only become. Jung called this purpose inflation. When the ego swells with ambition to mask a lack of connection to the self, you see it everywhere. The entrepreneur who meditates only to boost focus, not to find peace. The athlete who trains to exhaustion, not strength. The man who journals to optimize productivity, not presence. Each method that once promised wholeness becomes another instrument of control. The system consumes itself. Speed becomes identity. Rest becomes threat. The more he accelerates, the smaller his sense of self becomes, like a planet spinning so fast it loses its gravity. That's when exhaustion starts to look like betrayal, and even silence feels like failure. The mind whispers, "If I stop, I'll lose everything." But that voice isn't truth. It's trauma speaking through chemistry. The question isn't how to destroy drive, but how to separate it from compulsion. When dopamine stops being the driver, purpose begins to breathe again. There's a moment, small, easily missed, when you notice the urge to chase the next thing. It's not about suppressing it, it's about watching it arise. That gap is power. It's the space where biology meets awareness. Every pause tests identity. That's why it's so difficult. The achiever's nervous system is fluent in acceleration but illiterate in peace. Yet the moment you glimpse the pattern, the spell weakens. You see that the fire doesn't need to be extinguished. It needs oxygen. And when we begin to give it air, a deeper truth surfaces. Behind the addiction to achievement lies something older and more tender, the fear of losing control. And that fear, left unexamined, becomes the ego's final defense. There is a quiet terror beneath the illusion of control. It whispers that if you stop, even for a moment, everything will collapse. The deadlines, the appearances, the carefully built persona, all at risk. For many men, control is the last defense against an internal sense of regression, a fear that without constant action, the ground beneath them will dissolve. Jung would describe this as identification with the persona, the mask of productivity that promises competence and safety. The warrior believes that mastery of tasks equates to mastery of life. Yet beneath that mask lies a suppressed aspect, the lover archetype, the part of us that can receive, rest, and simply be. In repressing this softer energy, the ego convinces itself that control is virtue, when in truth, it is armor. The body mirrors this deception. Polyvagal theory shows that the nervous system reads stillness as threat. The moment you slow down, subtle alarms arise, tension in the chest, tightness in the stomach, an urge to act. This is not weakness. It is a survival signal that learned long before adulthood. Childhood conditions, where safety was unpredictable or contingent, train the body to equate pause with peril. Myth speaks to this pattern as well. Consider Icarus, wings of ambition fused with denial of limitation. He soars, ignoring gravity, because the thrill of flight masks the risk beneath. In modern life, the man who clings to productivity mirrors Icarus. The wings are his skills, his achievements, his visible progress. The sun is the truth of his inner emptiness, and when he flies too close, burnout is the inevitable fall. Control is seductive because it disguises fear as strength. It convinces the mind that if everything is ordered, nothing can harm it. But life has a rhythm beyond control. Even the most disciplined effort cannot prevent the ebb of emotion, the shift of relationships, the slow revelation of unmet wounds. And when control falters, guilt and self-judgment rise to fill the vacuum. The ego interprets failure as moral weakness, fueling the spiral that leads deeper into exhaustion. Dr. Gabor Mate would remind us that this is familiar territory for the nervous system, a protective strategy learned too young, replayed unconsciously in adulthood. The need to control outcomes, to force productivity, is not just habit. It is a wound speaking through behavior, and the more you resist the signals of your body and psyche, the louder they become. Yet awareness offers another path, not by abandoning responsibility, but by noticing the rhythm between doing and being. The warrior can lower the sword without danger when he understands that true mastery includes patience, containment, and surrender. The paradox is simple and yet difficult. Strength is measured not by how fast or far you go, but by how fully you can inhabit the present without losing yourself to fear. The moment of insight is subtle. It comes when you observe control not as competence, but as compensation. You feel the body tighten, notice the mind racing, and recognize the old pattern, fear dressed as discipline. That recognition alone begins to loosen its grip, and in that loosened space, another shadow emerges, the subtle guilt that masquerades as drive. A father's critical voice, internalized long ago, murmurs that rest is weakness, that pause is betrayal. It is here, in the interplay of control and guilt, that the next chapter of understanding begins. Beneath the compulsion to act, there often lies a quieter, older force, guilt. Not the occasional regret over a missed task, but a persistent, internalized pressure that equates rest with weakness, accomplishment with worth. For many men, this is the echo of a father wound, a subtle tyranny learned in childhood. You are only valuable if you perform, if you achieve, if you earn approval. Jung framed this as the superego, a moral overseer that can become cruel when unexamined. Freud described its rigidity, and Jung expanded it into the inner father, a voice that judges, corrects, and often shames. Its whispers are constant. You should be doing more, achieving faster, never slowing. Every pause threatens the perception of your worth, not in the world, but in your own mind. Consider the man who cannot enjoy weekends. As he lies on the couch, he invents tasks, projects, workouts, reading lists. The guilt is not external, it is internalized. His nervous system, accustomed to hypervigilance, floods the body with cortisol, while dopamine spikes reward the compulsion to act. The stress that should signal danger instead fuels motivation. He is caught in a seesaw of chemistry. Drive escalates, exhaustion follows, and yet the loop persists. This pattern becomes self-perpetuating. The mind, cornered by guilt, begins outsourcing worth to others. Praise, recognition, social validation. Achievements are not celebrated for their intrinsic value. They are currency, a measure of survival. Rest is betrayal, and motion becomes the only proof of life. Culturally, this is reinforced by images of relentless productivity and success. The man sees others performing tirelessly and interprets it as a standard. Yet few recognize that behind every achievement may lie the same hidden wound, the fear that without constant output, he is unworthy. Guilt and drive intertwine so closely that they become indistinguishable. The pursuit of goals becomes the expression of unresolved shame. Even the language of achievement reflects this. Push through, no excuses, grind harder. All phrases that quietly echo the voice of the inner father. They disguise pressure as discipline, compulsion as virtue. The shadow here is subtle yet persistent. The mind believes it is self-motivated, when it is actually responding to a long-learned script of obligation and fear. Yet this is not condemnation. Recognizing the pattern is its own act of liberation. When you can see guilt masquerading as drive, the compulsion loses its invisibility. Awareness becomes a tool to observe rather than obey, to notice when motion is feeding fear instead of growth. Even a brief pause, felt in the body, acknowledged in the mind, creates a crack in the cycle. And in that crack, the next mirror appears, the world itself, the voices outside, the applause, the likes, the validation, all reflecting back the same script learned long ago. The inner drive fueled by guilt begins to seek external confirmation. and so the cycle of exhaustion finds a social stage. There is a subtle transformation when achievement alone cannot sustain a sense of worth. The mind begins to look outward, seeking confirmation from others. Social validation becomes the invisible scaffolding of self-esteem, and applause, whether real or digital, takes on the role of safety. Likes, comments, recognition, they are no longer incidental. They are survival signals. Jung might describe this as the projection of the collective persona. The individual's inner critic finds reinforcement in the gaze of the tribe. The warrior who once fought for purpose now performs for mirrors that reflect his effort, not his essence. Online culture amplifies this. The rise and grind influencer is not merely a model. Unconsciously, he becomes a priest of exhaustion, demonstrating to the world that relentless motion is sacred. Neurology offers insight here. Mirror neurons allow the emotions of others to be felt almost physically, a form of contagion. Applause, admiration, approval. These experiences light up the same pathways as internal reward. The body, trained by trauma or early conditioning, reads social acceptance as proof of survival. Belonging becomes dependency. Approval is no longer a gift. It is a necessity. The subtle danger is that the external begins to define the internal. When your sense of self is held in the hands of others, silence becomes threatening. Rest without acknowledgement feels like erasure. The space where reflection or stillness could occur is filled instead by anticipation of judgment or the compulsion to demonstrate worth. Peace is not boring. It is your nervous system reminding you of safety. But if the system is untrained, it reads quiet as danger, prompting motion, noise, and performance. This dynamic often disguises itself as ambition or discipline. Men do not realize they are seeking applause to regulate inner tension rather than pursuing purpose for its own sake. The social mirror becomes a substitute for self-regulation, and the cycle of drive, exhaustion, and validation repeats. Yet even within this pattern, there is awareness to be found. The recognition that your self-worth is being outsourced to others creates the space for a pause. It is a moment to notice, who is this applause for? Whose voice am I answering? The answer is rarely as simple as external versus internal. It is the interplay between early wounds, nervous system conditioning, and the archetypal need to belong. In this recognition lies the doorway to the next stage. Silence, once terrifying, becomes a threshold. The sacred pause, a space of rest that is not guilt-laden, offers a chance to reclaim the self from dependency. The tribe may applaud, the dopamine may spike, but you can begin to find regulation within, a rhythm that is yours alone. There is a strength that is often overlooked because it does not clamor for attention. It is the power to stop, to pause in the midst of motion, to inhabit stillness without judgment. In archetypal terms, it is the movement from warrior to sage, the realization that containment, not expansion, is the measure of mastery. Strength is not in doing more. It is in holding what is, without collapse. Neuroscience confirms what the archetype has long known. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to integrate experiences, requires periods of rest. Without it, drive hardens into compulsion. Action repeated without recovery rewires the nervous system to crave tension and misinterpret calm as threat. The body forgets how to rest. The mind forgets how to simply be. The pause itself becomes a ritual. A microfast from stimulation, a deliberate gap in which nothing is tracked or measured, creates a space for the psyche to breathe. Even 24 hours without metrics, notifications, or obligations allows the nervous system to recalibrate. This is the modern equivalent of the samurai's ma, the meaningful interval between movements where mastery is not performed, but lived. In this space, the patterns of guilt, control, and social validation begin to reveal themselves. The urge to act, to prove, to achieve arises and can be observed without compulsion. The body registers the tension, and the mind registers the choice, to act or to simply witness. That witnessing is itself a practice of sovereignty, a subtle reclaiming of authority over internal and external life. Dr. Gabor Mate's insights remind us that the nervous system seeks regulation. When the external world demands constant performance, pause becomes a radical act of self-respect. The sacred pause is not indulgence, it is repair. It is the moment when ambition ceases to be punishment and begins to serve integration. Even brief attention to breath, to sensory awareness, to the body's subtle cues, fosters this regulation. One can feel the shift, muscles unclench, heart rate slows, and the mind perceives time differently. Rest is no longer a threat. It becomes an instrument of mastery, a space where insight can arise, where motivation can be disentangled from compulsion, and where ambition can meet purpose rather than punishment. The sacred pause is also a doorway. In it, the fire of achievement is no longer a consuming blaze but a controlled forge. Each breath becomes a bellows, each observation a shaping tool. Burnout is reframed. It is not failure, but the psyche's signal, a call to reclaim rhythm and meaning. As we move toward conclusion, we see that the path of integration is neither hurried nor simple. It is marked by awareness, by the delicate negotiation between drive and rest, by the courage to encounter fear and guilt without fleeing. The pause teaches that mastery includes both motion and stillness, both ambition and surrender. There is a forge in every man's life, a fire that drives creation, achievement, and transformation. Left unchecked, it consumes. Rushed, uncontrolled, it burns out the edges of identity, leaving exhaustion and emptiness in its wake. But when tended with awareness, that same fire learns to breathe. Heat without air destroys. Heat with breath shapes. It becomes steel, not ash. Ambition, when purified through surrender, becomes purpose rather than punishment. The man who once moved only to outrun fear can now move from insight, guided by rhythm rather than compulsion. The tension between action and stillness is no longer an adversary, but a teacher. Each pause is an integration, each breath a recalibration, each choice a reclamation of sovereignty. Self-regulation transforms into self-respect. To notice the urge to chase, to recognize guilt masquerading as drive, to feel the pull of external validation without being carried away. These are not acts of weakness. They are exercises in clarity, compassion, and presence. The fire does not need to be extinguished. It needs guidance. Its power is refined, not diminished, by conscious restraint. Reflection becomes a tool for discernment. When the nervous system flares, when ambition surges, when guilt whispers, there is now the space to observe. Whose voice am I answering? Which movement serves growth and which repeats old wounds? Naming the pattern is the first step toward repair. The recognition that motion itself is not the measure of worth. The invitation is quiet but profound. Consider this fire within. Notice its rhythm, its demands, its shadows. Watch it flare and let it breathe. Ambition, tempered by pause and awareness, can become a path to presence, clarity, and integrity. The man who learns this discovers a discipline rooted not in compulsion, but in choice. What is one sign that your drive has been serving fear rather than purpose? Naming it is the doorway. In that naming, the fire that once consumed begins to forge, and the path forward opens with quiet authority, calm awareness, and the unhurried strength of a soul learning to breathe.